I'm very excited just to ask you a little bit about your engagement with industry. So that's
Okay.
what we're talking about today. And so the first question is, I'd love to know more about you, and then your academic position, your expertise. Let's just start off there. That'd be great.
Sure. I'm Professor Maslach. I'm actually an associate professor in management. My background, I was a chemical engineer. I went to the University of Waterloo for chemical engineering. It's all Canadian, very much
Oh,
Canadian. And then I went to the Ivy Business School, which is University of Western Ontario, for my PhD. I did it in strategy and innovation. And now I am at an institution in Florida. I don't want to say it because I'm trying to separate. As part of the thing with sort of my industry connection with this, I try to make sure that we have arm's length transactions with the
totally
reciprocity
fine.
project. Yeah. And so I study things like innovation, technology. I study things related to learning from failure and decision making within companies. And believe it or not, it's kind of interesting in the business school. As in most business schools, we kind of try to distance ourselves from practical relations. I guess
Right.
you might be aware of that there
Yes.
is, yeah, it seems counterintuitive in terms of what we do, but we try to study organizations and study businesses rather than participate in a more meaningful way. So we're kind of weird in terms of, we're not like in engineering schools, or maybe it's different in Marybeth, where you're in the social science
I'm in the education school.
education school. So there is a little bit more consulting that happens, I guess, right?
Yeah, a little. I'm trained as
Yeah.
a historian, but I tend to be a little non-traditional. So, so
So this is actually my industry engagement thing, is trying to do something entrepreneurial with the Reciprocity Project and trying to build out this platform.
yeah,
And that's how we actually met, I think, which is
yeah,
really weird.
yes, yeah.
Um, yeah, a lot of people see me online and I get these kind of like weird looks all the time now, but I don't know who they are.
Yeah, no, I
Uh,
did some searches on YouTube related to academics and industry, and the good thing is you have good SEO because you were the top thing that came up. So that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. So
yeah.
that thank you. Yeah, thank you for the background. And so just to let you know, I'm writing this white paper that is focused on uh kind of best practices for industry working with academics and academics working with industry. And
Yeah.
so when I came across your work, I was, wow, well, this is an interesting person to talk to. And actually you were cited by a number of other people who were talking about industry academic partnerships as someone to talk with as well. So that's where the interest came from. So
Hey, very cool.
yeah,
Very
yeah.
nice.
So,
Yeah.
I'd love to know a little bit about, industry, like your experiences working with the industry. If you can name some, that's great, but if not, no worries. But like just your experiences working with industry as an academic, what has that been like? And can you tell me maybe some things that you worked on or done? That would be great.
So early on, I did like a little small consulting project for somebody. It was like a municipality, and I've tried to distance myself as much as possible in terms of the academic game, is to distance, because honestly, and it's not because my institution doesn't want to encourage that. It's not because that there is, there is sometimes a strong push at the institution level. It was really at the academy level
Yeah.
or the larger community, that if we were to do more of this, it would take away from doing research. And that is such a strong pull for almost all of us
Mhm.
that it's really not recommended. just because that we're trying to do this long run, short run game, right? So the short run game is kind of to survive and to get income in the short run.
Mm.
But ultimately, what we try to do, particularly in the business school, but I think like all academics do this, is we have to think about our long-term game. And that's where we need to really focus on doing the research, whatever that might be. I know of people that do this, that they end up doing it more later on in their career. If they do it too early on, then they end up not getting tenure.
Right.
Which that's the challenging thing, right? Is we only have so much time in the day. And so we need to prioritize what we're going to focus on. I know some other people that they might do something like develop partnerships for a program at a university, for example. But that tends to be a lot of legwork that you may not necessarily get credit for in the long run. And so we're always thinking about like, how do we make sure that we are protected as faculty, that we always have that sort of long run game. And the way that we ultimately get paid is through research publications. And so, I mean, that's how we eat. That's how we make sure that we always will thrive in the career, is through research publications. So there are people that actually study this more directly in terms of technology transfer. But they would study it. I mean, obviously they would do, some people do interviews and things like that, but not as many. Much of it is more, let's look at the sort of macro patterns of what's going on, particularly in patent data. That's a really hot thing in the innovation field, is looking at patent data. I know that there is people that do, that's primarily it. And then they triangulate it with, looking at the locations where patents are from, for example, who are doing that patenting in terms of whether it's industry versus like the firms that are doing it versus the inventors. There is a very much a thriving academic field to investigate what you're talking about.
Okay, yeah, I've been reading quite a bit of it, just because this is really the first foray I've had into thinking intellectually about this. I mean, I actually personally do quite a bit of interaction with industry, but I never really thought about when I was asked, like, well, what are the best practices? I started to read pretty extensively about what they are. So I'm curious, from your vantage point, like as an academic, what do you think if you're going to engage with industry, what are some things that are in your mind that you're thinking of? Maybe I better watch out for this, or I've got to make sure I do this, or what kinds of things are going through your mind?
Are they a time sink? I mean, ultimately, that's it. And is my time worth it to talk to them? Sometimes, and because you're an academic, I was just like, okay, I'll talk to you. But they'll reach out and they'll say, we'll pay you like $500. I'm like, $500 is nothing in terms of my long term, what I'm actually going to get by spending time doing research and the amount of prep that's often required. So it's usually really big asks for little pay in terms of what we're doing. So sometimes what people will do is they'll do executive teaching in business schools, and that's where they do more interacting, right? So there's actually a legitimate arm within business schools that do interacting with certain businesses. And they might get paid. I don't know what the sort of going rate is with that, because I don't do that as much. But they do spend a great deal of time in terms of prepping for it. So from the industry side, they think, oh, it's like an hour or whatever. But a lot of people spend like for an hour, you spend a day prepping and doing some research. So I think ultimately it's thinking about what is the return on you actually spending time with them and making it, and I know that sounds so greedy, but ultimately that's what academics are thinking about, because we're all little mini companies, right? We're all sole proprietors, and
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
thinking about how do we survive in the field.
Right. And I do think that that tends, because I've been talking to quite a few academics who work with industry, and they immediately say it depends on how much they're willing to pay. They say it depends on how much time it's going to take me. And then another thing that's talked about is, I don't want any infringement on my academic freedom, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's a really big thing. And yeah, that's a super big thing. I'm just going to leave it at that. Where lots of people are very careful about that today.
yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Another thing I was going to ask is, are there any, like, have you worked on any specific projects with industry that you could discuss vaguely, in terms of like the type of work and maybe how you approached it? I guess I'm wondering if you've ever done anything where you
Like,
had like a memo of understanding related to how you were going to approach it, when your deliverables are, and that's the way that business talks, right? When are your deliverables, like what kind of product you had to produce, or paper or whatever it is. Have you ever approached it like that?
yeah, no, I mean, it's really not that common in business schools to do that kind of
Okay.
stuff. Again, it's going to be more senior faculty, but then if they
Okay.
become senior faculty, they tend to be very much research focused anyways. So what we end up interacting a lot with industry, but the way we do it is different, right? We will study them as like managers, as if they're kind of like a petri dish, right? So
Okay.
we're reaching out to them, so it's not uncommon for, I know somebody in my academic field, like talk to Elon Musk, right? And
Good.
it's not uncommon to have that kind of interaction. But it's more on, let's study them like a petri dish rather than them
Okay.
coming to us
And
and
asking for
we,
your.
yeah, writing a white paper or something. So the way that we would do it is we would do that kind of, we're going to study them, or we might do executive education. I think it's David Teese at Berkeley created his own consulting firm.
Mhm.
There's another guy, I forget, at London Business School. He was, I can't remember his name. Gary Hamill has a little consulting firm. Rita McGrath, who is at Wharton or Harvard. But these guys, they consulted and created a little consulting firm. But these folks have been, I mean, they're 40 years in and they're almost doing
Yeah.
it as like, I'm an emeritus professor.
Right,
And
right, right.
yeah,
And
I'm
then they
taking,
run it through the consulting firm, right? So they're doing
yeah,
it as
yeah,
like LLC or some, I'm
yeah,
assuming. Yeah. Okay. Have you
yeah.
ever thought about doing anything like that? Is that something
Well,
you would
so
do?
that's what the whole reciprocity project is, right? So it started
Yeah.
out as me trying to, I wanted to create this platform to help us write and to do things to make our lifers easier. So I put
Mhm.
it on the internet, got contract developers, which was a whole big journey. And then I put it on the internet, nobody paid attention. So what I ended up having to do is to do a lot more of like this YouTubing thing and figuring
Yeah.
out what resonates with people.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't really get a heck of a lot of money out of this.
Yeah.
I wish I did. That would make my life a lot easier because then I can negotiate with my wife a little bit easier.
Uh-huh.
Because we spend an awful lot of money and effort and time and stuff on building it. But that's more along the lines with this, is that it is less the industry reaches out to us, we're probably almost always going to say no in a business school, unless the pay is just really good, because it's just
Mhm.
not worth our time,
Yeah. Yeah.
ultimately. Yeah.
Because especially for, and this is something that I'm trying to talk about, especially because you mentioned you're an associate professor, so I assume that you'll want to be a full professor, right? And
Yeah.
so you've got to weigh the time. Okay, if I do this and it's for, let's say, a couple $1,000 and it takes me this much time, but it's not a peer-reviewed article. And it's, it doesn't count in the the promotion process. Do I do it? Right. Just because it's for the money, do I do it? Whereas I'm in a slightly different situation because I can't be promoted as a faculty member.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, I don't have to think about that anymore. But when I was going from associate to full, I was absolutely thinking, okay, I know what counts, what is going to get me to where I need to be, and don't let me get distracted. So one of the things is that I think that full professors are probably much more likely to do industry consulting.
Yeah, but it's even still, I would say, like much further along full professors, right? Like once you've kind of tapped out everything that you wanted to do. And like, where you're going to be, you're at the institution that you want to be at and all of that, not doing it in the career climbing as much anymore, as you're well aware of.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, it's true. Wow. Well, that's interesting. I don't really have any, I only had like 4 questions. So this is like an easy interview, but is there anything else you want to talk about, or anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious with how do you, I just from your background, I'm curious because my sort of community is a lot of academics, lots of researchers.
Yeah.
How do you create a supporting environment where academics and researchers can thrive? What does that actually look like to you, given that maybe you want to give a little bit of your background, because I don't think we have yet.
Sure. Sure. Well, you and I actually have some interesting things in common too, because I really care about writing and space for writing and all of that as well. But so I'm a historian by training. My expertise is in higher ed. I mainly do work related to race and equity. And I am slightly entrepreneurial, I would say, because I started both a center and an institute, like national centers and institutes that are highly functioning. And so with staffs and, space and all of that. And I didn't do that until after I was a full professor, though. Okay, because I just didn't really feel like I had the knowledge or the bandwidth to do that. But part of, I'll explain, like, what I run an institute called the Proctor Institute for Leadership, Equity, and Justice. And one of the things that we have is we have a visiting scholars program, and we have about 25 visiting scholars from all over the country. And what we do for them are things that, and that's why I love this generosity project, because I firmly believe that the academy should be more transparent and more generous. And what we do for all of them is they get one-on-one mentoring from me every month. They can, have an hour to talk about whatever they want. They also get access to, let's say, for example, they wanted to turn their peer-reviewed article into a report, right? Like a really beautiful report that gets disseminated in press coverage. We will do that for them. So if they write it, we take care of the editing, we get reviewers, we do all the design work, we get them pressed, we disseminate it. So we do those kinds of things. We have a podcast series where they can come up with a really great idea for a podcast and then put on the podcast. We produce the whole thing. We also have done things with the visiting scholars where they wanted to do virtual events. We've done that. We've also created programs that they've envisioned, right? So one young woman, she wanted to create a program to support young Latinas on their way to the professoriate. So we have this great program now related to that. We help them, we read their op-eds and help them get published if they want to write op-eds. We review their CVs, just really anything that they're like, helping them with grant proposals, helping them with anything that they're kind of struggling with. And then we have every month, we all meet together for an hour. Topics are their choice. It's everything from work-life balance to financial management to writing a peer-reviewed article to getting a book, all kinds of things. It could be like self-care. It's whatever they want to talk about. And I either lead them, I bring in someone, or, and these are informal, right? Or if there's expertise among the group, perhaps they, will step up and do that. I really try to get them to do that. So that's an example of, for both my center and the Institute, we have visiting scholars programs, and we do that for both of them. And that's probably one of my absolute favorite things about my job.
Cool.
I just love that. I love working with young faculty and also PhD students around those kinds of issues. And I think the big thing is just demystifying the way that the academy works, because there's so many secrets and they keep people out. And I even wrote a book that is a guide for young faculty, right? It's called Candid Advice for New Faculty. And
Cool.
I wrote a book like that and just gave away all the secrets.
Yeah.
I was just like, we shouldn't be having these big walls up so that people can't figure out how to be successful. And so I really liked when I saw that you were doing that. I think that's incredibly powerful and important. So
yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. What's the number one thing? I'm going to have one last question, and then we probably should go, because I know you've got time constraints. What's the number one thing that that we all worry about? What have you seen that is like the most pressing thing that, what you could reassure with somebody in some sort of way? What is it that we really, what keeps us up at night, I guess?
I would say that, I've been the advisor for 84 PhD students over the course of my life. And I also have mentor, a couple hundred people across the country of all different stripes. And the thing that I hear every single person say is that they really aren't sure that their work matters. They really aren't. They just aren't sure, and they doubt themselves. They're not sure if they're really doing good work. Somehow they just don't believe in themselves. And that's something that resonates with me from when I would say, even up until I got tenure, I remember reading my stuff about to put the packet in, and I thought to myself, oh, this is just derivative crap. Like, I remember thinking that to myself. And now the other day, I thought to myself, I got some damn good ideas. I'm finally at 55 years old. I'm like, you know what? I'm not half bad. So, I think that's when I talk to a lot of young people, and even people who are in their 40s, right? Not that that's not young, but I'm 55. So it's like, when I talk to people, it's always that. It's just, they're like, does my work matter? Is this any good? And I think we don't spend enough time in the academy actually telling people, yes, it does matter. And yes, your work is good. Maybe it can be better, but it's, you're making an impact. And so that's what I would say.
That's cool. Let's leave it at that. I think that's a good ending.
Okay, well, great. This was great talking with you. And, I'm very excited. Very excited. Thank you.
Absolutely. If it'd be nice to cross paths one day in person.
Absolutely.